Hello, hello. Shall we start? Welcome again. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Mohan, a former professor from Indian Institute of Science, been closely associated with alumni both within India and abroad. And we have a large number of alumni. Happy to see you all here, including those who have come all the way from US. The two chairs of Alumni Association from North America are there. Some of the alumni from USC also are attending this conference. We are very glad that there is a good representation. Thanks to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to introduce the speaker. We had a good selection, 3 speakers, institute and academic institute. CSIR, which connects the academic institutions to industries. And the third one is from industry, Dr. Seshu Bhagavatula from Ashok Leyland. Seshu did his bachelor's and master's degrees in electronics engineering, then went to Germany to do his PhD in high-frequency technology from University of Stuttgart. He has about 25 plus years of experience in R&D, technology strategy, sourcing, and telematics with Daimler Chrysler. In fact, you'll be happy to hear that he came to India to set up the Daimler Chrysler Research Center. Today it's known as Mercedes-Benz Research and Development India in Bangalore in 1996, and was here leading this organization till 2001. Went back to Daimler Chrysler, Mercedes-Benz to Stuttgart. Before leaving Daimler, he was a senior director, engineering processes and product development for Daimler Trucks. He has several patents, including 3 in transportation to his credit. After Daimler, he went to work for Great Wall Motors in China, where he was responsible for research and development. In between, while staying at Stuttgart, he used to go to USA to head the organization of Daimler Chrysler, all the institutions of Daimler Chrysler in USA. He is currently the Chief Technology Officer and leads the technology functions across all Ashok Leyland Group companies. He is also in many boards of Hindujas. Apart from his technical, professional capabilities, I had the privilege of interacting with him for the last 32 years. I have been closely following his career right from his student days in University of Stuttgart. Even during his student days in Stuttgart, he was a member of the Indo-German Association. Anyone who is fresh goes to Germany, to Stuttgart, any problem, they will say, go and talk to Seshu, he will solve your problems. That's the kind of person Seshu Bhagavatula. He's not an alumnus of this institute, but he is a well-wisher of this institute. He likes this institute so much. When we asked him, why don't you give the talk, it's my privilege, and he came here, leaving all his work. Last year, Technology Day, he was very particular that Professor Anurag Kumar should go and give the inaugural talk. Later I saw he brought about 30 of his senior executives to SID for a training program. He knows the importance of academic institutions. As I brought him here in the morning, he has been busy talking to the faculty, students, and other acquaintances in the audience, and only when this started, people left him. That's the kind of person Seshu is. And now he is going to talk. I request Seshu to come talk.
While this takes a few more minutes, I probably will start so that we won't lose time. What does actually one talk to a set of people that probably are most intellectual in the country today. If you look at the density of intellectualism per cubic meter, probably on the earth today, this morning, this room must be like having a spike over Bangalore. Now, what does actually one do? What does one talk to these people? I've been discussing with myself, debating with myself for the last 3 weeks since Professor Mohan told me, Seshu, you have to come here. Now, I said, I could talk about autonomous systems, driverless cars. I probably could even talk about the big program we have on Ashok Leyland on electric vehicles, the swap technology, the fast charging, lithium titanate. But I said, no, this is not it. There must be something that takes us to probably a different world altogether, which could, in fact, get to a debate amongst ourselves. That was the original idea. Then I said, how does one do this? I drink every Friday beer. It helps me a lot in thinking. So I had 3 Friday beers. My topic was done. Now, you can imagine, I said, what am I seeing as a chief technology officer, not in the position, but as a person with the title? I am allowed to meet a lot of people. I'm allowed to travel a lot. I've got the privilege to meet some of the best brains in the world almost every once a week. So I said, so I must be getting a lot of information from them. So how am I seeing the world? This is my personal view, which is, as against yours, may not be the same. So, but then how does one do such a thing? So I said, I use a logic to bring you this information today. The logic is, you see something happening today, and you do linear projection. Linear projection could be, I say artificial intelligence would eradicate millions of jobs, right? That means linear thinking says all of them will be unemployed. Now linear thinking says all of them would go up on the value chain and do something altogether that we've never seen before. That's a nonlinear thinking. So I used my observations of what I have been seeing in the last years and do some kind of a linear and a bit of nonlinear projection. Now, this is what I'm going to say in the next 25 minutes. Now this is getting a little difficult because the rest I require a little bit of support, but that's okay.
I think we can just shut it down.
So that's okay. So some of the, let me start with it, by the way. Okay. Environmental factors will dwarf everything else in future. Governments will lose powers because they do not have any more environmental policies as the main ones in future. Now, we already have missed, right? You must have seen since the Kyoto Protocol, we've come all the way to Paris, and we saw, if you continue this way, we will go to 3 degrees centigrade. That means to keep that 2 degrees that we originally agreed, you will have to go to up to 2040, you have to go down to 1.5 instead of 2.0, so that you would again get back to that 2 degrees thing that we're talking about. This requires probably measures that we've never seen before to be employed to get back on track, including probably active carbon capturing and a massive amount of forestation on the earth. What do you do with all the people in the cities? Where do you have the space to do such a thing? Now, what does actually one do in such a thing is there a chance that we can leave the land and go into the sea? Can we think of cities on the water? Can we think of cities underwater? By the way, people are working on it. You see them already. How far will they become a reality is something that needs to be seen, but the concept is there. The first thing that people believe that will happen is that you will see mankind going up and vertically, strato buildings, going all the way up to kilometers long with new kinds of materials that some of them will come from Indian Institute of Science, I'm sure. Now, before you really start going into the water, 3/4 of the space on the Earth is water. If we can somehow live on the water, where we came from originally, possibly you can leave the land for some time to get back in shape. Now, there are people working on all of them. I meet, and I'll be meeting those people as well. So that's one of them. That's one of the points I'm talking about. Second one is, there is no correlation to the slides, except that all of them point to something that probably could happen with some amount of probability. The second one is if I say the next generation politicians are all going to be global. They will be more like CEOs, right? There's no left, there's no center, there's no right. There's no ideology-based governments in future. I'm talking about the millennials that are maybe around today, 10, 15 years old. When they get into the power, they're not driven by any ideology. They will all be people who were born in a world, what we call the post-whatever, post-World War, post-crisis, and post-digital, and even post-autonomous. They will be an entirely different generation. 30% of the world consists of mixed children. Where's identity? You're an Indian, German, and father was German, mother Indian, and the kids, you can't talk of identity anymore. That's what is going to happen to this world. Now, imagine a world ruled by those politicians who are mixed children, who are not driven by ideology, no left, no center, no right, and also they believe, because they grew up in a world that's digital, where cooperation is the essence of everything that they do, that means they are inclined to go with cooperation as a means between the regions. Environment is going to dwarf everything so much, I can't say my environment I take care in Pakistan will be not all right. Environment is global. It transcends regions. It transcends everything. So I believe environmental factors will force us so much, cooperation is the only way for the world. So much so that it will force governments to completely come up with altogether different model. In fact, there are people who believe, I'm talking about the people I meet, they believe United Nations will become so powerful, or whatever organization that could replace United Nations or still use the same instruments we have, that could probably be the only platform that would survive. National governments will lose importance. Those that we think, so one of the biggest other things that we see today that's happening is, yes. National economies will not be independent anymore. Borderless world. Inequalities in the societies, I'm going to talk about in a minute. Universal hunt for cleaner and sustainable energy. Future of mobility. Emergence of game-changing technologies. Change in the nature of work and the place of work. Data misuse issues, frontiers of science. Now, these are the things that I've been collecting in the last 2 years. I meet a lot of people. I'm fortunate enough to meet those people very regularly. Now, environmental parameters. World is now completely off the track. That's a statement. Heading more towards 3 degrees centigrade this century rather than the 1.5. To bring it back onto the track, you need to have radically different mechanisms, including, as I said, active carbon capturing. In fact, if you look at the first business case, business models people talk about, it's not expensive, by the way. All you need to do is to cut down 10% of the defense funding on the earth. It's that simple. We've got the money. Money is available everywhere. It's actually the direction that's required. That's because we still have this, politics from the Second World War, this I differentiate you with something else, the traditional ones. I think this will continue for some time. Our environmental factors will dwarf so much of it that we have no other go. Even you will forget the regional differences once for all. So the next one is, for example, as I said, national economies. Countries cannot depend on internal producers anymore. You're so dependent already. Or you look at nearly 100% of production will be automated. Production itself is a repetitive job. Repetitive jobs can be done by robots very well than human beings. Economies will increasingly be data-centric, and data is global. Just send a mail, it's gone. You will have to have some kind of a different policy for data, not geographical limitations. That's impossible. Now, there will be big talk. I'm sure a lot of discussion is happening in this institute as well. Now, look at next generation politicians. Not prejudiced by race, nationalities, and so on. They're all different people. Now, globally educated leaders, leaders who seek cooperation as a means for success, will not see war as a means to achieve national and regional objectives. This is what is going to happen with the next generation of people. Now, borderless world. Why is it borderless world? Wars with weaponry will become irrelevant. You don't achieve anything with wars in future. So it becomes just irrelevant. So if a war becomes irrelevant, what do you do with the defense funding? It should be redirected to something else. So or look at companies will become so global, employees will be able to travel across countries freely. There will be small little kingdoms. These big companies will be like small little kingdoms, or most countries will not have any entry restrictions. Today, I have a German passport, but I have an Indian OCI. But I don't require visa for any country in the world. Just maybe one country. This is going to be the new norm, because they don't see any more. You see, these inequalities, the day they disappear a bit more, you just go back home, where you go. So there is going to be a time where going to another place and living in another society loses its importance. It becomes irrelevant, which you already see, by the way. A lot of us, especially the ones who have been actively engaged in global jobs, you just don't even notice we were working. There was a time I used to work 2 weeks in Detroit, 2 weeks in Stuttgart. And I've worked like this for 4.5 years long. And you don't sometimes notice where you are. And today, I'm talking about 20 years ago. Today, this generation, they're much more global than us. So world is going to be borderless. I'm only talking about a few things. I don't interpret much. These are observations. And a little bit of stretch we do every once in a while to show that these could affect our life so much that we may have to think on them right now at this stage. So, borderless world, the future cities. Now, stratoscrapers, there are all kinds of models coming up. The reason why they do that, I was talking to a Swedish macroeconomist the other day. He said, before actually if you want to get the world back in shape, you need to do massive amount of forestation. You need to make the world green again. And we have already spoiled quite a bit. What do? You need to actually free up the space. So you either go up, that's the only way, for some time, or you go to the space, which is also an interesting part, but that's not going to be easy today or tomorrow. It's going to take some more time. So that means, for now, until we colonize Mars, we'll have to go up and free up the space. So this is using lightweight, so you can imagine what kind of a research that's required to support a structure that is 10 times taller than a Burj Khalifa. And in fact, more. Now, there are also people working on undersea cities, houses located in giant shapes under the sea. The weight determines the depth. The pressure stops a city there. And they also move a little bit. Is a concept people talk about. Or you look at the floating cities. They're also a concept people talk about. They're all meant, one of them is the basic urge for the human beings to set themselves free from all the limitations given by the gravity and clean up the mess we've done. Both now get combined together, and that's what's going to happen over the time. Or you look at the mobile ocean cities. This is, there are intellectuals talking about probably this only way. Imagine if half of the population, world's population, could live on the water or underwater, floating, changing the place, border. Who talks of border? International waters. They move the place, they live wherever. That's not a big thing. Technically, we can build those cities today and free up the earth, free up the land space. So I could imagine over the time, these concepts that today are in the labs could potentially become real objects, real projects someday. So inequality in the societies. The kind of inequalities that we see today may not exist in future because the next statement is a statement that I think will happen, which is basic commodities will be available to all: food, shelter, clothing, education, health, and basic transportation. Now, if that happens, I just pay 100 rupees every month. In Germany, I just pay 100 euro a month, and everything, my health is taken care of forever. Now, I add 100 more euro, and this all becomes, so that means there will be a time for all of us, we don't work for those things anymore. That's the ultimate statement. If we don't work for those things anymore, imagine a world. It's going to be entirely different again. Now that will have grave but interesting and fascinating consequences to the mankind. Now, societies will become knowledge-based, and inequalities are measured on knowledge. Because access to information will become universal, but not knowledge. The next one is access to water and pollution, less air, could become, in the transition period, could become a part of inequality. They will say, you know, I earn so much of money, I live in this particular area that has better air than this one. There could be different inequalities coming into societies. World is actually flat now. You see, when I was born, when some of you were born, we had no electricity, no roads, we were all born in villages, and we had to walk in the mud to go to the school, and you see what has happened today. Now, we had no access to information. Today, the kids in India, the kids in the United States, or wherever, they have access to the same information. It only takes seconds before they know. World is becoming flatter and flatter. There is going to be a different kind of probably set of parameters coming as a differentiation or inequality parameters, but one of them could be pollution, other one could be knowledge, maybe something else. Maybe something else. So let's look at the next one, future of energy generation. Now, you know, nuclear fusion technology, space-based. So nuclear fusion technology, you know, Germany is a country I can talk about because I lived there most of my life, 35 years now, and they're deadly against nuclear energy. And they say, you know, it's clean, nice, but you have to store it for ages, and you could actually spoil everything for your next generations. And keeping that rest is such a big complex stuff. But there are people who believe you can use moon for it. There's no atmosphere. Throw everything to moon. So you could probably imagine, because nuclear energy, even now, is probably the best one that's, you know, the most efficient one possible. Or maybe there's something else. So now look at the flying wind powers. You saw these people building these gigantic, flying and autonomous wind farms that actually go where wind is available. It's an optimal use of wind wherever they are. People are working on them right now at conceptual level at this stage, doing some simulations, but small little stuff is happening already. Now you look at these micro-nuclear reactors, you know, small little ones that could be transported to wherever you want. Well, we hope that there's going to be no accident, but let's say we master that one day. But this is what's happening. You look at all the other very, very new forms of limitless and sustainable energy sources will be discovered, even creation of energy from natural disasters. There are people who believe that every time there's an earthquake, you can take all the power out. Or any lightning that comes out, you could capture all the energy and store it. So there's mega thinking happening in the world. And all of them are working on one thing. How does mankind become independent of the kind of cost we have for generating energy? If energy becomes cheaper, a clean one, problems are solved. Space travel becomes easy, everything becomes easy. Energy is a fundamental problem we have today. So, future of mobility. People talk of CASE, this is tomorrow by the way, or even today. Connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. Everything gets connected, everything gets shared, and you've got electrification happening, whatever that is. Then you also have, now let's look at peer-to-peer. Now this is a disruptive concept. Now, Do I have 10 more minutes time? Okay. You know, I just want to spend one minute on it because I believe there's something that's happening. I do see the pattern emerging right now. Now, you see, today I talk to you, and I pay no money for talking to you because I'm just in front of you. Talking is a basic need for human beings. But I go home and talk to you. I use the telephone. Someone else is earning money. What if I were in a position to communicate directly with you with no one in between? The one in between is gone. Today, if I want to go somewhere, I log on to some website, collect some information, and go there. What if this information in real time could be given to me by some means? I could. We would see middlemen going away. There will be, that's peer-to-peer. Electronically, 7% of human beings, if they were connected through by some kind of a near-field or far-field communication system, and they act as hoppers, information hoppers, I could literally get information in 39 nanoseconds from South America to here right now. He's got information, I need the information. A self-organizing society with no middlemen. Shared, today for shared, I have a car, you have the need, you have to go to some place, and someone in between is earning money because he puts us together. What if I had another mechanism where I and you can come together with no one in between, which is going to happen. Middlemen will have to be careful now. That's one of them. Anywhere you see there's a middleman today, middle company, middleman, imagine this would someday vanish away. It's a matter of time because we're connected. We're connected to such an extent that information in real time can be available anywhere. That's one of them. So the other one is, as an OEM, we're also watching this worrying for me, naturally, as an OEM guy, automotive guy. We seem to be getting into a place where everything is becoming more or less pay-per-use. So an electric bus today is, we have a lot of research, a lot of products coming up in electric buses sector now. So, you know, battery is 65% of the bus. I'm not anymore, I don't have the value chain in my control. If I take the battery and a motor and something else, there's only what we call Indian English, the dabba is left out for me, the box. There's nothing to differentiate. Now, if I imagine a city where transportation is free for people, what do I sell? The product is becoming irrelevant. There's another peer-to-peer, as I said, there's another statement I always typically use, I learned from people, is things that you believe that are very, very important for you today, they become one day irrelevant. They just have no more role to play in your life. Imagine, you know, having a bicycle in those days when you could, fantastic. Now today, just take a bicycle wherever you go. Now, they become irrelevant. That's what is happening. Completely irrelevant. Transportation becomes irrelevant. You don't have to spend time. So now, shared is something where peer-to-peer will get to a stage where the middleman will go away, and everyone will get connected to everyone. The need is known to the man who's got the solution, and in real time. So autonomous vehicles. I could imagine, not in the very near future. I'm not just talking of India, I'm talking of the whole world. Possibly autonomous systems would start in work in progress in the factories somewhere, and over the time they get onto the roads, maybe in 20, 30 years, I could imagine that you'll see a lot of them cooperating with each other, talking to each other, and traffic lights talking to the cars, and cars entering into a crossing, they form a network, and there are no more traffic lights. Everyone knows you're supposed to now take left turn. In the next second, the other one gets 1.5 seconds later, all of them go. There are simulations available. You can see how many you can throughput through such a crossing is unbelievable, 10 times more than today. So future mobility extended. You can see the famous man, we all know him very well. He said that just before he died, I don't think the human race will survive the next 1,000 years unless we spread into space, and humanity must colonize space. This is linear thinking. He was warning. And non-linear thinking is we have learned, we clean up the earth. Or we do both. We clean up the earth and also colonize the space. which is, I think, what's going to happen, my personal belief. Intercontinental air travel become much faster. You know, people talking about better than Concords, again, coming back, New York, Berlin, 2.5 hours, probably more. Discovery of Martian atmosphere will continue and could end in humans colonizing it. We've been all watching this news in the last days. Atmosphereless moon could be used for certain things. There are thinkers who believe moon has a role to play in our space exploration because it has no atmosphere. You don't contaminate anything there. So that's an idea people think of. Imagine an atmosphere-less planet could be used for probably dumping all the waste or whatever, I don't know. So you look at exploring other planets and, you know, we'll continue, like Alpha Centauri, we see them. Private space flights and tourism to other planets. We see it's happening, it's a matter of time. Mining asteroids for precious metals using moon's water stores to produce rocket fuels. You see them, people talking about it. So now you know about this one as well, artificial intelligence and blockchain. 2 minutes? Okay. Artificial intelligence and blockchain. That's the beginning of the peer-to-peer world. Imagine if I could have an artificial intelligence-based routing algorithms with a blockchain platform put in place that leaves the middleman out. The principles and the rules have been written in such a way that I form, for example, Indian Institute of Science Alumni has a blockchain platform with an artificial intelligence routing algorithm. You could communicate with no one eavesdropping on you forever. So there will be, me and my family will have one small platform for ourselves. IISC Alumni will have another platform. India will have one platform. My company will have one platform. So you see the world, this is what's going to happen. AI with blockchain is potentially a very disruptive technology. So professor said democratization. That's what is going to happen. Democratization of everything. That's what I see happening. Now, so the next one is new materials. I don't have to talk to Indian Institute of Science on new materials. But I just want to tell you something, it looks like you dope literally every material these days. You can dope every material with another material to change the properties of the material in such a way that it does sensing, it does processing on its own. You required a sensor, you required a material, you required a processing mechanism, control electronics. They would all vanish. The materials would do everything on their own. That's the ultimate one because you're able to dope everything these days. So the next one is future workspace. What does it actually mean? Physical jobs, repetitive jobs, they'll all go on. But again, to summarize the whole thing, I think there is a fundamental shift happening on the mankind level. The whole automation and other things happening for one thing, that the value that human beings are going up on the value chain. There seems to be a fundamental shift, which has been all the time there, but in sitting in the middle of it, we seem to observe that the shift is happening much faster now. So I believe all the jobs that we seem to be losing, they won't become, maybe transitionally for a few years, you might see 1 million jobs, in the transitional phase, someone losing job, but I can't believe that it's going to be too long. So they will all be doing other stuff, creative jobs that we don't even know that existed ever. They will all be coming up in the next month. So there are people thinking of no more teaching the traditional science or engineering. They seem to teach, because you cannot predict what's going to happen, you have to teach people how to teach themselves. So that when things happen too fast, they at least start using the tools to learn the new things, since you cannot project all of them right now. So that means the future education should be of teaching people how to learn, rather than teaching the topic. So that's, I think, future human resources, data privacy. Data privacy is one thing you see, the misuse, we already see it. That means at some point, I control my data. Any of these middlemen who use my data for commercialization will probably lose their business cases. So that means I will have control over my data. So there are already platforms people talk about is that I use only this data for this particular operation, I take it back after the operation. So Your imagination is the only restriction on what you could do with such a model. Last sentence, I have to close down now with the neuroscience genome research. What are the questions? Yes, that's it. So where does this rapid progress take us? Is this the beginning of the next big phase of humanity? Or is it the beginning of the end? I don't know. Thank you very much.
My apologies to the speaker for hurrying up, making him hurry up. Yes, we lost some time also, but I'm sure we have 1 hour time during lunch. I will hold Seshu in the lunch. Any one of you want to ask questions, answers, and all these things, we can have it during lunchtime. We thank Seshu, and probably I request Professor Anurag Kumar to give a memento to the speaker.
Thank you.
So we'll now have the panel discussion on giving to IISc. We have eminent set of panelists. I request Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, Mr. Lakshmi Narayanan, Dr. Mrinalini Rao, Dr. A.V. Ramarao, and Dr. Satya Ramaswamy to please come on the stage. Let me give a brief introduction to the panelists. Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, of course, as all of you know, is a co-founder of Infosys. He and his wife, through the Pratiksha Trust, have made a generous gift to IISc to support research on the aging brain and Alzheimer's disease, as well as cutting-edge research in neuromorphic computing technologies through endowed chairs, young investigator positions, seed grants, and support for workshops and exchange programs. Mr. Lakshmi Narayanan is the director of Cognizant Foundation and an alumnus. He is supporting a digital library of life project at the Center for Ecological Sciences. This is aimed at building a one-of-its-kind digital database of South Asian biodiversity. Dr. Mrinalini Rao is the co-chair of the IISC Alumni Association of North America and an alumna. IISc ANA has not only made direct financial contributions to IISc, but also been instrumental in helping IISc raise funds from alumni in the US. Dr. A.V. Ramarao is the founder of Avra Labs Hyderabad. He has enabled a generous gift to furnish a state-of-the-art auditorium in the new building for the Division of Chemical Sciences. Dr. Satya Ramaswamy is the Executive Vice President of Mindtree. He is also an alumnus. He has played a key role in the establishment of a Mindtree Associate Professor Chair at IISc to promote research in areas such as artificial intelligence. Now I request Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan to take over.
Thank you, Professor Rankarajan, and good morning to all of you. I need to confess on one thing. I have not talked to the panelists before, and so they have no idea how I'm going to run this panel. But I think surprise makes it actually going to be interesting. We will see how it goes. But we will basically try and cover 3 points, and after that we will make it interactive. And these are 3 simple questions, and I will ask each of the panelists to respond. First is, what is in it for the alumnus? That's all of us. I'm an alumnus of IIT Madras, University College in Trivandrum, Model School in Trivandrum. So not an alumnus of this institute, but I'm sure that each one is an alumnus of some institute. So why should the alumnus engage with the institute? That's the first question. The second question is, what is in it for the alma mater? Why should the alma mater engage with the alumni out there? And the third is, what are the models for engagement? And we will go through each one. Just to get started, for me, the important thing for engaging with institutions like IISc, IIT Madras, multiple reasons actually to see world-class institutions created in India. I believe that we must have world-class institutions. We are, in some sense, we have these institutions, these are world-class institutions. IISc is #1 in India. But how can we take it to the next level? The second is to engage with these institutions in certain areas of research, which I believe is very important, not just for India, but rest of the world also. Third is to sustain these institutions. I will give you an example of the school that I went to, Model School. It's a government school. All through I studied in government institutions. And if I remember right, the annual fee was 12 rupees throughout my school education. If you do a postgraduate degree in an institution like IISc today, the government gives you at least some reimbursement for that. So we have benefited from studying in government institutions. In fact, after my what was called pre-degree those days, 12th, my family wanted me to go to MBBS and medicine. I applied only for one government medical college and I didn't get it. So that's why I had to switch to BSc Physics. And the reason was simple. We couldn't have afforded to go to a private institution. So if government institutions are not there, I think, probably the people in this room and their children may not lose out, but vast majority of India will lose out. So it is important to sustain government institutions, I strongly believe, and we have to prove that government institutions can be world class. They were, and they are, some of them are, but if you go to the schools now, they are nowhere actually. And the reason I wanted to go back and help Model School was they were going to close it down. And I was very upset that they were going to close down a school which had generated so many brilliant students in Kerala. In Trivandrum and in the state of Kerala, in those days when I was studying, that's 40 years back, all the ranks were either government model school or Holy Angels Convent, which was the private. But typically in the first 10 ranks, 5 will be from the government model school and 5 will be from the Holy Angels Convent. But today we can't talk about any government school producing any rank students. Though of course in the higher education we still have some, but if we don't step in and sustain these, we may lose out. So these are some of the reasons I felt I need to engage with the alma mater. And of course, one of the reasons is, if I want to say that I studied in model school, the school doesn't exist. If I say IIT Madras, and IIT Madras is seen in terrible light today, and I may not want to talk about that actually. I may want to hide about it. So let me start with Lakshmi Narayan to give his perspective on why alma mater, engaging with alma mater matters to you personally. I'll share.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. The element of surprise is always interesting. Those 3 questions, I thought Anil Kumble was going to throw googlies only in the evening. Now we have got a practice session with Chris. First and foremost, those of us, in fact, it's all of us here in this hall, are far more privileged than so many others that are outside this hall. Privileged in terms of the opportunities that we got, privileged in terms of the education that we got, privileged in terms of the network and the connections that helped us build a good career. And we are in a position where we have or we can afford to spend more time thinking about others than about ourselves. That is a very, very rare privilege. Once you start thinking about what is it that I can do, what is the larger purpose that I can contribute to, then you think about how you came up, like the way Chris described. These are the things that I went through in order to build my career. So can I go back and help hundreds and thousands and millions of others who are in a similar situation? Can I help them build a similar career? Can I bring the type of happiness and the peace that I have with so many of them? That's the fundamental thing that is driving many of us to say that, good, we are in a good, comfortable position. What is it that we can do in order to help the others? And the answer that you always get to is, how can we educate them? How can we educate and provide opportunities for people so that they can realize their full potential, so that they can be successful? Helping others succeed, in what way can we do? One of the ways is, coming to institutions, interacting with the alumni, etc. But how do you choose an institution? If you have a purpose, if you say, I want to promote research, cancer research, then you kind of go about doing research in which are the institutions that are doing fundamental work in that area. And then these are the institutions that are doing some kind of research, and they are starved of funds. So can I go and support those type of institutions? So if you have a direction, if you have a vision, approaching it, and that vision or that direction could come from various elements. Someone could say, my father turned blind very early in his life, so he couldn't build a long career. So I'm going to fight blindness and support all those causes. So that is something that occurs to people. But if you do not have any of those causes, you say, okay, I want to support as many people as possible. And particularly those of us here who can support many, many causes, you identify multiple causes and say these are the areas that we want to work with. And then the question of proximity, convenience, etc. comes into play. Like, for example, Chris said, although he's not an alumni, maybe because he's close to this institution, and IISC is one of the most reputed institutions that can develop research, he has chosen this institution. I'm an alumnus. I say, okay, what is it that I can do? What is it that I can do now? What is it that I can do in the future for this institution? Plus, like him, he is supporting IIT Madras because he's been there for a long time. I support IIT Madras and set up some digital skills academy there because of proximity. I'm not an alumnus of IIT Madras. I support Chennai Mathematical Institute, which I believe strongly is one of the institutions that require a lot of support. mathematics is the fundamental, it's the language of research as we go forward. So I said, mathematics education is something that you should support. Is that the best institution in the country? There are others, but it's one of the best. But that's an institution that's starved of funding. So let's take that, set up an example, and go ahead to it. So as to education is one area, healthcare, and there are other areas that I am interested in. But when I take up education, the way I look at it is, if I have to make a significant impact to the cause of education, I cannot be spread thin across various institutions. I'll have to pick 2 or 3 areas and work and engage with them deeply in order to make a difference. And that's the path that I have chosen, working with higher institutions. So that answers why education and why alma mater and the other institutions. And the model is very, very difficult to figure out a model as to what is it that is going to create the greatest impact. So you kind of lay down some 2 or 3 parameters. What is it that you want the funding or the grant that you give to achieve? There are some people who would say, I want to give so that I get the greatest visibility for the grant that I've given. There might be people who say, I want the grant to have the maximum impact in terms of bringing people out of poverty or providing opportunities for the younger people. I want to contribute in a sense that takes India or the institution to the highest level of research anywhere in the world, because that is an undernourished, underfunded area. So different people have different priorities. And then you pick one such priority, 2 such priorities, and then work on that. And the priority that I picked was, how can we work with leading institutions so that top-class research comes out of those institutions? Okay. CMI, Mathematical Institute, I mentioned, IIT Madras, this institution, etc., stand right on top and say, is there some way you can help them in areas where it will produce individuals, researchers, that may not be thousands and thousands of them, but they are potential Nobel Prize winners, etc. The greatest happiness that we got from Chennai Mathematical Institute, which is, by the way, funded significantly by Infosys Foundation also, and Chris has also been a great supporter of that institution. When one of the students from that institute has been part of the team that got the Fields Medal in mathematics, then you say, there is a larger purpose that you have accomplished, and you want to continue to fund that institution and see if we can create many more such people. So that's one aspect where you create specialized people who will become, Nobel Prize winners in the future. And the second one is create a model where you can make the institution themselves self-sustaining. Something that I've noticed in the last 4 to 5 years is government gradually vacating this space and withdrawing, providing funding to research institutions particularly, and encouraging them to say, I can give you grants, but then you find someone else who will give an equal amount, I can only provide a matching grant. This wasn't the case earlier. For those people who are familiar with the evolution of the space research program, the atomic program in this country, and the setting up of IITs, etc., those are days when the scientists didn't have to go about begging for funding, either to government agencies or outside. But the situation today is very, very different. So if you realize that more and more effort will be required to sustain the current level of government funding, you clearly require growth funding from alternate sources. And the alternate sources could be, 1 is grants, 2 is establishing opportunities where the institutions can commercially also benefit. One such example that started was the IIT Madras Research Park, almost 10 or 12 years back, essentially brought the faculty, researchers, and students together in a model where enterprise can be encouraged, entrepreneurship can be promoted, and these companies can flourish and create wealth, part of which will be shared with the institute itself. That's a model that is working well. IIT Madras Research Park has created a number of such startups. We tried a similar experiment, or in the process of trying a similar experiment in CMI. we have created an Algo Labs, a laboratory that's focused on algorithms. Any industry, any individual, any company that has large amounts of data that needs to be analyzed and some sense or pattern to be recognized among them, they can post that problem to the institute and they'll come up with solutions where students and the faculty work on it and develop, and that's creating revenue, and there is a positive surplus that has been pooled from this Algo Labs year after year, and that is going back into the institution for supporting the research activities. So that's another model that seems to be working, which is the reason why I'm interested here in Institute of Science also, because there is a Society for Innovation and Development. SID has a number of startups, a few of them, thanks to the connections made by CS Murali here, I've encouraged some other people to look at it and fund it, so that we can create an activity that will, in the long term, provide sufficient funding for the institution to survive, and also for the faculty here to apply the research that they have through another vehicle that is available. Researchers are a different breed of animals. They want to continue to research and not engage in commercial activities. There is a vehicle that's available now in the form of SID, where they can participate in that activity without dirtying the hands, but get the benefits back into the institution. So these are the type of models that appear to be working. Still early stages. I don't know which one will work the best, but this is what is driving me into working with institutions and people like you here. Thank you.
So, 3 questions are questions on why give, why IISC, and what kind of a model. So I'm going to first talk a little bit about the kind of model. I represent the IISC Alumni Association of North America. I want to acknowledge my co-director, Dr. Murthy Gudupati, who is my partner in crime. He's from the Jet Propulsion Lab. And our model of giving is a little different than the individual approach to giving. We all have, I think, the same philosophy of giving, which is that we want to give back to our alma mater. And we feel that doing it collectively may be more effective for us and for our individual needs than the sum of the individual parts. So we formed this totally not-for-profit volunteer organization called IISC ANA, and we provide both feedback to the institution or giving back to IISC, both in terms of tangible returns like resources. A number of our members have used the IISC ANA as a conduit to provide resources in terms of either travel scholarships to students or rather larger grants to the institution through the aegis of the IISC ANA. And we have a pamphlet outside so you can look at the details of how we function. We also think that there's a more intangible way we give back to the alumnus, because we give back to the organization. And why do we give back to the organization? As has been stated, IISC has been a great educational opportunity, and it's been a privilege and an honor for most of us to receive some or a larger part of our education to this institution. We have fond memories ranging from the quality of the food in the various messes to actually the intellectual stimulation we got in this institution. And the strength of any educational organization is dependent upon its faculty, its present students, and also its alums. And the institution has been talking, Director Anurag Kumar spoke about the branding initiatives. And in some ways, one huge group that brands the institution are the alums and what the alums have achieved. So we are hoping by using the format of this kind of group collective activity that we give back to IISC. We give back in terms of mentoring, providing networking opportunities. Many of our members are also engaged in individual donations back to the institution, but also back to society. They are behind setting up educational opportunities in India, including in terms of science education in schools and notebook drive. And we also try and help the communities in which we live. And in all of this, we, in effect, are branding IISC, right? We are telling the world that we belong to this organization and we want to give back. And it's a different model than an individual donation model, but we feel this is a very effective way we want to communicate. We have concerns of how this is going to go ahead in the future, because being a volunteer organization, the strength of a volunteer organization depends upon the success with which that volunteer organization can make that connection back to the alma mater. What is IISC going to do in terms of recognizing its alumni versus what do the alumni get in terms of benefits from this institution? We're also concerned about gender parity. We see that we graduate a lot of women, but as the women progress through whether their careers either here within the institute or outside the institute, we would like to see more women representation amongst our leadership, even within our own association. We like to see what kind of public-private partnerships can be developed, research collaborations can be developed between those of our alumni who are in North America and back at the home institution. A number of us find the bureaucratic steps that do exist, and that we would like to help bridge those hurdles so that we could have a much better access to the global world that you spoke about in your earlier talk, which I thought was very inspiring to be able to lead towards that kind of future. And ultimately, by our message, we would like to have a very positive societal impact. We would like to be the holders of what are ethical standards. We have to worry about cybersecurity. We have to be at the forefront of that. And we would like to be part of that conversation and improve that dialogue. I think that would be good as an initial startup.
Thank you. And
first of all, I would like to thank Director Anurag Kumar as well as Professor Rangarajan for giving me this great opportunity to be here in front of all of you and to be part of this great panel. For me, from the Indian IT services industry, to have two legends of the industry, in fact globally recognizable legends, Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan and Mr. Lakshminarayan, and beyond the panel is such a pleasure. And for me, the reason to give to IISc, and in fact my giving is a bit different from these two gentlemen who are giving from personal side, whereas I am enabling my organization Mindtree to give to IISc. And but still it has got two dimensions to that. First is a very emotional dimension, and the second is something that to get something done for my organization. So I'm an alumni of IISc Bangalore, and in fact it was exactly 30 years ago that I was wrapping up my ME in computer science department, and we had a function in the ground floor here. I could vividly remember that time. And all the memories that went before that, right? Professor C.N.R. Rao was the director of the institute, such a titan in our field. We all have such a affectionate, loving memory of Professor C.N.R. Rao. And the experience of the institute, right? I'm sure all of you going through the institute get the memories jogged, going to the EMS and having such a fantastic food in the EMS, and going to Gymkhana and playing hockey for a long time. And the great professors that taught us all the things that we know today and that built my career, I'm extremely thankful for that, right? And I want to find a way to channel that into giving back to the institute. And the second aspect of it is, being in a different stage in my career compared to Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan and Mr. Lakshmi. So right now I'm leading an organization, a business in Mindtree called the Enterprise Reimagination Business. And to quickly recap my career, I was in Motorola for about 6 years. Then I did 2 startup companies. The second startup got bought by TCS. Mr. Chandra, who is now the chairman of the Tata Group, saw the applicability of what we are doing to the digital programs of his customers. So from 2010 to 2017, I built the digital business within TCS. And then, I could see that our industry, the Indian IT industry, which has grown for the last 50 years, is going to undergo dramatic change, right? And the impact of the AI technologies. In fact, I remember I first learned about neural networks here in IISc. I remember going to the library here and just reading about neural networks. And those days, you cannot really implement a neural network effectively and make it do anything. But the advancements in the GPU technologies and others over the last 4 or 5 years have dramatically put these technologies in the hands of democratizers and make it possible to do great things. And I could see that in the Indian IT industry, we have literally hundreds of thousands of employees being employed in things that we could see the opportunity to undergo drastic transformation. Like Mr. Sheshu talked about, it's not about linear thinking, but really looking at the nonlinear way of changing the way that we do things and raise the profile of our industry in the world. And so we are focusing on 3 things. One is we call the BPO reimagination. That is, in many cases, the business processes that the employees in India do are essentially acting as a glue between the physical world and the digital world, right? For example, many times you get something in a written form, in the form of a letter or something that comes to an enterprise, but then all the internal processes are on systems to which you have to convert from this physical world into the digital world. And this is typically done today by human beings, right? People literally, we know customers who have hundreds of people sitting and taking a document and extracting the right components there and then putting into the digital system so that it goes from there. And that really is not the way that has to be there, right? We really need to intervene in this kind of situation. The second situation is where human beings are acting as a glue between multiple digital systems who cannot be connected otherwise. And all of this is going to dramatically change. So we see a huge opportunity in using modern deep learning-driven AI technologies to fundamentally reimagine the BPO and essentially transform the lives of literally hundreds of thousands of employees in India, in the industry in general. The second area of promise is what we call the enterprise core reimagination. So many of the companies that we work with, whether it is bank or insurance companies, have been developing systems for the last 50, 60 years, and these are really teetering on the verge of collapse, right? So in the whole digital revolution that we did, the last 7 to 8 years, people have been applying the so-called API layers on top of these systems and then doing digital on top of that. But now that is going to change, where you have to fundamentally reimagine the core itself. And then, Professor Anurag Kumar talked about IoT, and we see IoT as a key enabler of transforming many of the physical business processes that are there in manufacturing and travel transportation and many other industries. For example, take vision, right? So computer vision today has advanced to the point where the machine vision is better than human vision. And that can dramatically transform many business processes. And there are many, I think Mr. Sheshu was talking about how we can eliminate many of the dangerous jobs people have been doing and make it automated and through IoT. For example, we are today helping a customer in the engineering, procurement, construction, installation industry as part of the larger oil and gas industry, where they essentially manufacture these big oil rigs, which they manufacture on shore, and then they move it to the ship it to the location on the ocean, and then bolt it to the well. And today the maintenance is done by people, right? So you go send them out on helicopters, and the insurance is high. The cost of these people is very high, and so it's a heavily human-driven approach to maintenance of these platforms. Whereas we are helping this customer embed sensors and vision systems that will completely transform all this, right? So in order to do all this, we realize that there are challenges that has not been solved yet. And therefore, we see a very strong incentive from our side to collaborate with institutions like the Indian Institute of Science. And I was looking at Professor Anurag Kumar's presentation, where practically I can check every single item that he was talking about, from vision systems to AI systems to IoT systems to data visualization. Every one of them I want, right? So we started this dialogue with Professor Govindarajan and his team, and found a great match to contribute. So it was a win-win for us and the institute. And therefore, we went ahead and created initially an endowment for an associate professor position. Professor Vijay Natarajan from the Computer Science Department is now the occupant of the chair. But we also initiated discussions with Society for Innovation and Development for a starting of an engagement on the other areas that we talked about. And we see tremendous strength here in the institute, and for simply our sort of selfish reasons or commercial reasons, we really want to collaborate with the institute in a big way.
Thank you. Mr. Ramrao.
First, let me introduce myself, because I don't belong to any engineering at all. I'm a hardcore academician. Published several papers in international journals, especially in organic synthesis. Also, I interacted with the pharma industry right from my early age, and I was acted as a catalyst for the generic drug industry in this country. Then the third thing, when I retired at the age of 60 as the director of the Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, I decided in 1 minute that I should become an entrepreneur, which is a very, very unusual. I'm the only guy so far in the country turned as a scientist to be an entrepreneur. Now, why? One of the reasons I felt we have acquired quite a bit of knowledge. I passed on to several of my 109 PhD students. And I used to tell them they should go. I used to send myself to the United States to some of the best schools. And I used to ask them to come back. 80% of them have never turned up. I felt we were educated in this country at the government expenses. At the same time, we should also give back to this country. But none of them, they always say yes while going. But when they return, none of them fall. I also went on telling them they were in a good positions. Why don't you come start industry within this country? Because you have acquired all these skills. But let me tell you, after repeatedly telling, I myself proving as an entrepreneur, 10 of them have returned. The second thing is, when I retired, I told my wife, I will not take pension. That means I will not use my pension for household purpose. The reason is, if we think of pension is there, I may not do well as an entrepreneur. You know, I always keep telling my students, if you don't know swimming, if you are thrown in a well, would you like to die? No, you catch something to survive. So that is the way I told my wife, I would like to go back like a research fellow and work myself. What I know, only research. So I started research for the first time in the country as a business proposal. And we have because of my personal contact with the US pharma companies, I could get 2 grants straight away. And one guy gave me a shed. We started working with 10 of my former, the students who have completed PhD but not the degree yet. They started working with me. And that is the way, from a zero investment, where I told the same thing. My pension I would like to donate to poor students' education purpose. That is the way I started. Now, I never realized that we will grow. Today, we employed about 750 people. The more I employ, the more happiness I gain. And I also make it everything open. We discuss thoroughly to everyone. And I always tell them they should leave after certain stage, start their work. In this way, first thing is, I believe in skill development. Before even the government started using this word. Second thing is, whatever is possible we earn, we should also donate. So starting from the pension, I started donating. Then later, about 10 years back, we started 3 of the elementary schools, what you mentioned, are in a bad shape. They don't have the furniture. They cook the afternoon meal outside. And don't have even the notebooks. These are all the poor, real poor children they go. Otherwise, nobody is going now to private schools. So we provided entire infrastructure in the school, 3 schools nearby to our organization in Hyderabad, Nacharam area. We build the kitchens. We also give, every year we give the students, right from the back, the notebooks, everything. Later I realized, being an alumni, my education is, I'm not a pure science graduate. I did chemical technology from at that time, UDCT, what is called now ICT. I'm proud of my institution. One thing, probably I would not have become an entrepreneur without the engineering background. It has helped me a great deal. So the last year I started, a year or 2 years back, giving something to the ICT. And it so happened is very casually, Professor Uday Mitra, whom I know all the organic chemists, I used to come here as an examiner for PhD students. That way, as an academician, I do come. Professor Siyanara is close to me. I'm a hardcore scientist. That way, I used to interact with the institution from outside. One day, he just mentioned that he needs 5 crores to equip the chemical laboratories auditorium. He wanted me to influence the pharma industry. He never thought I will be able to give that. I never believe asking someone. If you have to give, you give, otherwise don't ask them. So I casually mentioned to my son, who himself is a PhD from Cambridge, this is what they need. He said, why don't we give? Let your names exist, because it is like putting a bet on the best horse. Because you can't find an institute like this. We all know it is the #1 institute in the country, whether it is science or engineering. So that is the way. I just spoke to him in the next day, that 5 crores we will give. He was a bit surprised. And that is the way the donation has been. Now, finally, I wonder always why many of us here sitting academically will be the best. Why don't they start themselves when they retire? I think we have the skills, but we are scientists, I felt, always scared of ourselves. That is the only biggest scare we have got. The second thing is, we never interact with industry in this country. I've seen myself at Harvard, every professor, my own, the professor with whom I worked is a Nobel laureate. He was a consultant to several pharma companies. He always spends time. He earns by that way. I myself started as a consultant at the age of 32. I was making more money than my salary since then. What I mean is, interacting with the industry, we keep on. The knowledge has to percolate. And percolate because many things we don't know what industry does. But you will gain. It is a win-win situation if some of us take the initiative. The second thing is, by being a consultant, you can also directly direct it to donate to your own institution. In fact, I was doing at that time, for several seminars and symposiums, I used to tell them liberally to give. So some of these things, donations and other things, indirectly we can bring ourselves. Finally, I would like to urge everyone, if possible, 1% of your salaries when you become a professor should give to your own alma mater. There's nothing wrong in that. 1% is not a big amount according to. So ultimately, what it matters is a question of giving. And that is what I urge everyone here. Do everything, whatever is possible, to the society. Well, one thing, I realized, but for ICT, I would not have become a consultant, nor I become an entrepreneur. It is the institution which influences you. It is that institution we should never forget what we have given us, what they've made us today, what we are. So some of these things we have to keep in mind always. So with these things, I would like to leave at this stage. If there is any questions, I'd like to ask.
Before I open for question and answer, I just wanted to summarize. You've seen different motivation for engagement at the individual level, engagement at the organization level. So both are possible. In fact, the organization that you belong to also you must connect to the institute. Second is the giving can be small or large. In fact, I will add to what Mr. Ramarao said. I believe that every alumni of this institute must get into a habit of giving. So start with 1,000 rupees a year. Every single person, every year, they must give. And in those years where you can give more, you should give more. And at different stages of your life, you start adding more and more to that. But start with 1,000 rupees a year at least to the institute. And of course, the institute must set up a mechanism to receive this and account for this. I also believe that giving time, make sure that you visit the institute at least once a year. I think that's relationship has to start. I've been working with the Alumni Association of IIT Madras for the past 20 years. I don't have experience here, I will tell you for sure. But I can tell you that every single meeting, 60% of the people I meet have been there for the past 20 years. The remaining 40, some trickle in, trickle out, but it's very difficult to find new people coming in. It's the same set of people I meet again and again and again. Why does that happen? I know I'm preaching to the choir here, I know that, but it's very rare. This institute is more than 100 years old. I know it has, 1 lakh alumni now? 25,000, okay, so small number. But 25,000, if 2,500, 10% should at least come for these meetings, right? But we have hardly 250 people. I think these are, what I'm saying is I'm preaching to choir, so what I need is you to take this message out to people outside. And the last point I want to make before I open it for Q&A is, first you give, first you start interacting, first you start engaging. Okay, these institutions have certain organizational structure, governance model. They are open, but their openness will come from you building your trust with the institute. Don't start coming and saying, I know what needs to be changed and I know what needs to be done and this is what I'm recommending. You will actually erect walls. They have their own issues and challenges and problems. They're trying their level best. And it is important for you to get their trust. And believe me, I've seen this across now. Lakshmi Narayan is here. He is also working with the similar institutions. They would desperately want your support, but build the trust first. Okay? It's very, very important to understand that. And over time, you will find that you will start engaging more and more. With that, I will open. Sure.
So
I think you have some experience in US where there's a very strong model of giving back and engaging with the institution. Briefly, because we want to open it up.
for sure. And I just want to address the one issue that you brought up about why is there not enough turnover of younger alumni coming back into such groups. And we, in our organization, face this issue head on. And one of the things we like to give back is when young alums come from India into the US, we're trying to provide them a mentoring network, a network of opportunities, because they're trying to build up their own careers. And they're very focused, like you said, in their own careers early on, that they don't think about this larger issue of giving. But if we, of the older generation, try and draw them into that interest, I think that makes a very tangible connection. So you can give in a lot of different types, in addition to giving back to the institution, to give to our alumni to succeed and provide that network.
Sure. Briefly, any question? Yeah, please.
My name is Murthy Gudipati from Indian Institute of Science Alumni Association in North America, JPL. I would like to go off what you are talking about, but touch upon one common point that you are all actually brought up. That is giving back. One thing that lacks in most of the people is this habituation of giving back. So we need to bring it at the school level, at the level where they don't have any capacity to give back, the thought of giving back. So what I'm doing, in addition to all these things, is I started a small organization called NSNY. Professor Mohan knows about it. It's a nurture the schools that nurtured you. And I'm trying to make IISc students to go back to their schools when they go home and adopt a school which is underprivileged or underrepresented and talk to the students, be a role model. And these students are not able to give back in terms of money, But the main goal is to habituate in their minds the thought of giving back, and that is the starting point, and then later on, one generation later, the whole thing will change. Thank you.
I am Panapa, the very old plant chap from the Institute of Science. Now, as far as the giving back in directly is concerned, is given. It is to be accepted by everybody. There's no questions asked. But there are two other alternatives. One is people who know got the money, induce them to contribute, whether to directly to Institute of Science or some other education institution. It makes a lot of difference. But there's a third point, the knowledge gained by the Institute of Science training and what you get in the please use it by expressing your opinion where you find that, if I attended 2 conferences, everybody talked about something which is not right, which needs to be corrected. There is no voice of dissent. This is where, if you are convinced of something, please express. I don't want to tell the 2 cases because it will be very awkward for people who do it. So if you're convinced of what is the actual thing which should be done, please express your opinion freely. Don't be afraid to just because everybody is keeping quiet. This is very important to show that the Institute has given us not only knowledge, but has given us a backbone to stand on our own. This is something which I request everybody to consider, because we're going to help society. Because people who are going to propagate this will influence the policy making of the government, investment, directions, so that can really affect society in a long term. So it is essential that we make use of your knowledge and express it fearlessly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Myself, Manoj, 2015 pass out of this institute. I had a small point where Chris mentioned channel of giving. I think all the institute where we go into, we have small caution money which is deposited at the start. It might be hostel or anything. Where I graduated from BTech, there was a NGO kind of thing which used to help underprivileged children. And the pass out of year of all the BTech students, the current part of that NGO student will go to all the pass out seniors and will ask them, would you like to donate your caution money? And there was a very simple channel. We would sign and give this paper. Whenever this caution money is released, goes to that NGO. I tried to do the same thing here, and I couldn't do that. I request administration to do that. It will help in channelizing that big amount. I'm kind of sure when we get out of the institute, we have good job or good looking forward that we don't need that money. I hope that would be a good way. Thank
you. So I have been working with, I'm Narendra Huja. I've been at Illinois for my entire career, but the last 6-7 years I've chosen to spend most of my time 80% of my time in Ministry of Electronics and IT, running a program called IT Research Academy. What I have observed is, first of all, it's common knowledge. We all know that government all over the world is the biggest spender on the country, including government institutions. However, increasingly, all over the world, there have been now programs which are targeted, which are beyond academic institutions, and they are taking problem areas to improve. And my observation is that the productivity and effectiveness there is relatively low. So I'm wondering or I suggest that one of the ways in which an industry can help people who are in industry is to offer themselves to the government to make the effectiveness of that program, those programs, higher.
So, we are getting comments, that's fine, but make it very brief because we have very little time left.
Yeah, I'm Lakshmi Shramaswamy, a professor from University of Georgia. I graduated from computer science back in 1999. One question and one brief suggestion. The question is for the panel. when you have provided or when you have given to IISC, do you just give it without worrying about its impact? Or do you periodically go back and review the effect it has had? And if you have reviewed, what were the parameters or what were the metrics that you measured? My involvement in whether it is time or whether it is money, whatever, what impact it has had. Have you thought about it, or do you just give it and
I would request Rangarajan probably to comment, because I can't comment about IISC alumni, this thing working. But I've seen, what I have seen from IIT Madras is, see, the contribution comes in two buckets. One is to a specific project, right? Many of the people talked about specific projects. And there you get a status report about the project, how the money has been spent, where the money has gone, etc. When it goes to a general pool, you get again a statement about all the projects that the institute has done using alumni money, and this is how it has been spent. So these two reports, I'm assuming that is there in IISC also. And it is, typically if you're registered, you will get an email from the institute with this periodically. That's what I have seen.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. The principle that I have followed is, before giving a grant, you evaluate the cost, the people who are going to execute it. Once you are given, don't interfere, because they are far more responsible in using it responsibly.
Yeah, my name is Narendranath. I graduated in 1980, and I've been in the US since '82. So following upon the question that this gentleman brought up, I think we have to look at ourselves also, because one of the things that when I was here and when I went there, it was a big eye-opener for me. IISC for me is on par with the best university in the world. And when I was here, at the end of the month, I used to have money in my pocket, enough money in my pocket, after a full good meal, 3 times a day in C mess, B mess, whichever is the mess, right? And by the way, I have never found a food as good as the messes here across the board. I can tell you that. And I think now, what opened my eyes was when I went there and then I saw the MITs, the Harvards, people graduating out of that, after 4 years, would have a loan or a debt of several $100,000
yes.
on their shoulders. And they took years to pay that back. Here, as I said, I used to come out with a positive cash. My room rent in N block or M block or E block, etc., was 15 rupees a month at that time, right? And so when we look back and see, I think for the level of education that we have got, it's fair to say that probably institute, and when we say government pays for it, it's actually the people on the street, the peasants, the farmers, the rickshawalas who pay for it, right? It's one of my friends was calculating approximately that we received something like 5 crores in terms of the education, simply by the level of the education, and the jobs it provided us, and the step up it gave us, and the money that we make across the board over our lifetime. Okay. So as you mentioned, even 1% of that, or even 2% of that on a yearly basis is an amount that I think, and we should not ask again, where are you going to do, what are you going to do? As long as we know that, okay, here is a good purpose, let's go ahead and give it first. And then we'll go ahead and ask for accountability.
Yeah. So, right. Thank you for, as I said, if every of this alumni, every one of the alumni starts giving 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees, whatever, you all agree every year, I think that'll be a good start, and then we can, grow that. That becomes also the habit that you talked about.
Yeah, my name is Shankar Prasad. I'm not an IISC alumni, but I joined here for PhD, then I wanted to move out of Bangalore, so I went to IIT Kanpur. The question I'm going to ask is, the North American IISC, we run an education trust where we give money for higher education for people who want to do BE, MBBS, etc. So people who want to join IISC, if there is some way, some of you could channel that money instead of giving directly to IISC, because we give it to, as he said, the rickshawalas' children, the bonda fryers' children, like that. We really give it to extremely poor people. So it will be a very good opportunity to see if there is any way to channelize.
Now, you can talk to, the two of the office bearers here, please talk to them directly. I think you have to also look for time, actually. Yeah, so his point is help. Yeah. No, clearly, both are important. You have to give your feedback, and I'm quite sure the institute will receive it positively. See, you need to understand, there is a transformation happening in the institutes in India. They did not have this mechanism to actually reach out to alumni in an institutional way. These are all run by volunteers, probably. In IIT Madras, now we have engaged full-time professionals, 3 full-time professionals who actually get paid, I believe, more than the director now. Because they are in business development roles and their compensation is tied to the money they raise. And so service levels have improved, communication has improved. I know I have experience in IIT Madras, that's why I'm quoting IIT Madras. I'm quite sure that IISc is also moving in that direction, looking at these things. But this is a change that has happened only in the last 5-10 years in India, unfortunately. That you need to think about service, you need to think about how do you bring in visitors, how do you encourage visitors to come. But that's why I'm saying everybody coming to Bangalore should visit the institute. Even if you are coming to India, just try and visit, spend a day. This will change because your feedback will be taken positively, because they will have to make sure that when you come, you get a coupon to go and eat in the cafeteria and things like that. You decide which, but give them also some advance notice. Inform them ahead of time, you are coming, this is the department you want to visit, this is the person you want to visit, so that they can make time available. And then the alumni association will make sure that somebody takes you around, etc. So that this is all professionally organized. If you US university you go, there will be a student who goes around with you. You're not let loose like that actually. Yeah,
yes, yes,
so
yes.
you can...
Last one, last one. Yeah, yeah. See, for a change, let us have some entertainment. How about collecting 7,000 rupees every hour from this hall at 9 hours a day, 63,000 rupees every day into 365 days will be 2 crore rupees, 29 lakh 950 rupees. And I will be able to get you that for next 18 years. Are you willing to take? I am going to give 2 crore 29 lakhs 95,000 rupees a year into for 18 years. I will be able to give from this hall. Every hour you can collect 7,000 rupees from here and go. Every hour. 9 hours a day. Yeah. How I will tell you, last week I attended a workshop in RV College of Engineering, one of the best engineering institutions. There, principal was telling the audience that he come across several parents every day bringing their children and asking the principal, I want to admit my children to the engineering course. Kindly tell us which is the branch I can admit where there is no mathematics. So when we were studying also, there was only something called PCM. And at that time, plague, cholera, malaria were abundant in the country. So here, now those things have gone, but people find it extremely difficult to understand the subject. In fact, somebody asked me, can you teach some problems from this book? I went through the CBSE books. Every book, there are minimum 32 professors' name was there in the editorial thing. They have contributed their name.
Can I interrupt?
But yeah, 1 second only, 1 second. So there, I want to read the thing. Passage is very difficult to understand for me because I am from a Kannada medium school.
Sir.
And the exercises given at the end.
Can I?
1 second, 1 second. Exercises given at the second are not relevant to the topic that is covered in the section. Now, with tremendous amount of hard work, sleepless nights, etc., I have started writing free e-books for smartphones.
Okay.
You just type it in the Google, you get it, you can free download it, and I am going to write several thousand books like that. It is available for free. And why I said this RV College was, now mathematics class, it is very difficult, so many colleges are there. We will teach from here, charge 100 rupees per candidate for a 3-hour course. Okay? I am going to use this hall, get you 2 crore rupees, 29 lakhs, 95,000 rupees every year. And you connect at 7,000 hours, collect every hour from here itself. I don't want money.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? No. It's already tax deductible. In India, it's tax deductible. In the US, yeah. So the IISC ANA is so it is tax deductible in the US also. So I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank you all. Interesting comments and engagement. But every one of these sessions should go with an action item. So what you need to do is encourage your friends, encourage your batchmates to start the habit of giving. Please do that. And next year, we should have at least 2,500 people attending.
I now request the director to present mementos to the panelists. Since some people are leaving, the lunch is in the main guest house. In the evening, everything is in the Giant Art Auditorium. Please assemble at 5:15 p.m. in the Giant Art Auditorium.